Okay, then. Let's see if we can get into some things. Time and energy, or time and money, two probably the two most precious resources as a average citizen, right? And certainly, I need more time and energy to get some of these videos out and return exploratory minds. I'm passionate about many subjects out there, and I love the new discoveries. They don't quite know how something works, but they're trying to work it out. The mysteries out there. Quantum physics, the observer effect, bizarre. Some bizarre things with that, and so on. And you could really tantalize the mind with some of these things. And certainly, I think what. Let me bring the microphone down a bit. That's a bit. I see that going into the red a bit. So, new mic, new settings. Huh, there we go. That should be better. I don't want to bust your eardrums. So, what I think in society where we lack understanding is not so much the sciencey stuff that we're looking into and all that. Well, yeah, there needs to be a better science of understanding ourselves and how certain chemicals and things have change our perception a little bit, or perhaps change how things are working in the brain in such subtle ways. They're tiny tweaks that can make a big difference. I've talked about caffeine addiction. I made a whole long video about that. I don't know if that's still on this channel. I need to tidy up this channel a lot, then delete or put some videos and put some on private and just look at the transcript and perhaps redo some of those, because some of the things on some of the older videos have been, there's new information that's come in, particularly like videos like oddities about the moon, and some of it was a little bit rough and I might have got some things wrong here and there. Official oddities, like, NASA.com agree this is a bit odd or something about the moon. But it'd be great if they could land there again and discover. But what drives the need to do such things? Well, if you look at history, why did they go on the moon in the first place, or the Cold War? And it's geopolitical tension that drives, unfortunately, a competition to get there first with our advancements in technology. And good luck, America, advancing with anything right now. You've got bigger problems. Yeah, that was always a boiling pot, of going to just overflow, guaranteed. America's just built on lies. It is. It's nothing but a bunch of fucking lies. Excuse the language if you have delicate ears. I do want to be a little bit more cleaner in language and professional on this channel, as opposed to my other. But we talk about one chemical that needs to be really properly understood a lot more, and I think more investigated on the neuro side effect, the neurology side of things, is THC. And I'll see if I can pronounce it. It's in cannabis. It's tetrahydrocannabinol. So we say THC for short. In cannabis, it's psychoactive. It's changing. And, what is the most consumed psychoactive drug in the world, do you think? You might go and say THC. No, it's not necessarily consumed, though, is it? You might say something else. It is caffeine. But you don't think of it as psychoactive. Do some experiments like I did with seeing if you can, making sure that you have no caffeine for like 2 months down the line. And combine it with experiments if you can manage it. Really cold showers in the morning. There's quite an experience there, and you'll see firsthand. Yeah, this is a um, not a mind altering, because altering it would be a permanent thing, but you can. Yeah, we get into that in a separate video, perhaps. I've briefly talked about it on this channel before. Again, I want to tidy up some of that. Anyway, so welcome to Exploratory Minds. I've been looking at some aspects of THC, and I know I don't like to say in my social circles, but there's some come and gone. But some people that worked in same place where I work used to where I worked years ago, not where I work now. You know that THC is frying the short-term memory. What also fries short-term memory is lack of sleep, but also THC reduces REM sleep, so there's a connection there. REM sleep, they seem to agree, people who are studying sleep, it stands for rapid eye movement, it's where your eyeballs are looking around within the dream state. If you're dreaming, and a lot of people consciously don't, not a lot of people, some people, a rarity, consciously don't have access to their mind's eye. Yeah, they can see anyway. So there's got to be some kind of access because your visual cortex is creating what you see. It's not like a video camera, and there's no light that goes inside your skull. Photons influence the optic nerve, but inside your skull is black in there, but somehow it creates this image of what you see with your open eyes, right? So, sure, because we got that ability that is processing, and what we process in the day, and different neurons doing different things in the day, they can do that in a dream state as well. And be incorporated into your dream, which is no reason why you can't have a mind's eye, but there's those accessing points are not plugged in to that which is there. It is processing, is my take on that. It is there. There's some articles out there, cases of people being described certain things and doing certain techniques gave them access to a mind's eye. And then they was able to kind of improve their mind's eye and build on it. It's not like a photographic memory, though. It's not like for those who don't have one, it's difficult to understand. For those who do have one, it's difficult to understand those who don't have one. But I've tried to wrap my brain around it. I think I got some ideas of how that is for some people. The lady that did my most recent tattoo has this no mind's eye as well, who was I was put in touch with from a friend who became a tattooist anyway, but kind of lost touch with them, but probably catch up with them again. All these ins and outs, the brain, the mind fascinates me. So the word cannabis refers to all products derived from the cannabis sativa plant, and there's so many, they call them strains, right? This contains about 540 chemical substances. And, the two main focus ones is THC, CBD. But then, you can get CBD oils, and you get sub-derivatives from THC as well. And these whole bunch of other chemicals that influence the body. And you can get, I think, a shop near me they're doing things like with CBD infused chocolates now, and that's pretty cool. I've tried some of that. It's like they have the more bitter type of dark chocolate, and this is infused in it. Have a look up Montezuma's chocolate. It's um from what their advertising is. I think you only can get it in the UK, but I think they're doing some stuff like that. Montezuma's is, as chocolate goes, it's very niche, very unique. Putting all like uh, lime and spices in the chocolates, and yeah, pretty cool, I think. And a side effect, talking about neural effects of chocolate, it's not in it, but the processing of it, the body processing it in the gut, is serotonin, which is a good neurotransmitter. So again, there's all these different things I'm interested out there. It's like, hey, what's in this that changes the mind? And I don't mean in a way in which, hey, how can you trip out for the sake of tripping out? What I mean is, how can you do some things to help you focus better and all that? And again, that was the experiment I did with the cold showers and the caffeine. But when it comes to THC, I don't think there's too much you can do past a certain point that it becomes very detrimental. I think if you're reducing REM sleep, I think that's a bad thing. As is bad news. And THC has proved to, in many studies, to reduce this. So Psychology Today is what I'm reading up on to you for this video, and I'll probably look into other aspects for this and maybe do another video or perhaps write about something, try and interpret things in layman terms if I can find a way to do that, because it gets complicated when you talk about percentages and chemicals, CBD, THC, and all these things. And just like anyone else, I struggle with when it gets a bit too technical because I'm not an expert in such things. Not a chemical scientist or neurologist, but it's interesting to read up as a layman on the side effects of these things. So, read that bit. What the word refers to is from this plant, 550 chemicals. It refers to parts or products of the plant containing substantial amounts of, you got a triangle, then 9, then a hyphen, tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, is the intoxicating substance. Let me underline that a little more. Intoxicating substance. It's a neurotoxin, effectively, primarily responsible for affecting a person's mental state. The more than 100 other cannabinoid substances have been identified, but the key cannabinoids are THC and cannabidiol, or CBD. Years ago, factory work I did, we was allowed to take, could be assigned out work, which would be some small thing or whatever need to be put together that you could do in your own home. So hence the term out work, out of the factory in your own home, and you bring it in, so you get paid a little extra for doing that. One lad was bringing his bag of out work to work, and he'd always stop a small shop on the way. And it's just one of these, you could smell it on him a lot. He was a bit of a bum, and he was just stereotypically, I guess, too much weed. And, he'd be smoking that during break. And it's kind of, it's legal but not legal in the UK. It's a blind eye, and it's Well, perhaps again that would be a separate video on the laws with that. And you can tell his short-term memory is just blown by. If you talk to him about certain things, and it's just, yeah, you forget what you're talking about and then repeat himself or whatever. But he stopped at the shop before he went to work and left the bag of outwork just outside the shop. He got into work and said, "Oh, I don't know. Oh," and he penny dropped. "Oh, I stopped at the shop. I must have left them there." Absent-mindedness and short-term memory just fries so much. There's no time for the short-term memory to offload into longer-term memory to know where you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it. So yeah, and that's hinders the ability to learn new things. So that's not good. The FDA, that's Food and Drug Association, was an American authority, and yeah, you look at the state America's in right now, you can't trust anything, really, anyway, that America does, regardless of whether they're official or not, official in quotes. So the FDA not approved the cannabis plant for any medical use. However, the FDA has approved several drugs containing individual cannabinoids. For example, Epidiolex, whatever that is, containing a purified form of CBD. So there's another article similar to this and other bits we might go over, we'll talk about. Whether it's this video or not, there's quite a bit here. So containing a purified form of CBD derived from cannabis is approved for treating seizures associated with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and Dravet syndrome, two rare severe forms of epilepsy. Cannabis products have diversified significantly, big time, and you got to question the amount of THC that are in some strains that are bred and propagated and grown by some artificial selection for that specific thing to increase that. And it's not too good really. The higher it goes, it really isn't. Anyway, especially with the legalization and commercialization of cannabis in many areas, modern cannabis products contain higher concentrations of THC compared to traditional flowers or buds. Marijuana tested at Woodstock in 1969 was usually cannabis sativa at 1% THC. 1%. Now you're talking about 90 to 95% THC of some strains that have been selectively grown and tweaked here and there. It's a big difference, right? So, cannabis sativa at 1%, the famous Woodstock event, generally about what they were smoking at 1%. Today's cannabis flower typically contains 15% THC. Concentrates are highly potent extracts of cannabis that can exceed 90% THC levels. For example, wax is a concentrate, a soft waxy substance extracted from cannabis with a THC concentration of 60%. Shatter is glass-like, brittle concentrate that shatters when broken. and can have THC concentration of 90%. THC diamonds, dabs, moon rocks, crumble, live resin, and rosin are ultra high THC preparations. Edibles like gummies, chocolates, baked goods, and beverages typically are 5 to 10 milligrams, but 100 milligrams per package are also sold. Vapes, cartridges for vaporizing cannabis oil have THC concentration of 50 to 95%. THC isolate is a pure THC crystal or powder devoid of other cannabinoids. So it's just THC. And terpenes, which can have a THC concentration of 99%. Tinctures taken orally or sublingually are 10 to 50 milligrams per THC per mil, while infused beverages are 5 to 20 milligrams per serving. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a huge difference, right? Let's search something there out of curiosity. Looking for that. Yeah, there's other pages on the addiction to this as well. And people will argue, oh, it's not addictive, or that it's just psychoactive drugs are not addictive. Yeah, they are. It depends a lot on the person as well. I think the psychological state they're in. Yeah, it's actually a known disorder now. They have recognized some addictions and actually called it something. I forget what is a disorder. Yeah. Anyway, if this reads on, the THC more often equals more risk. More THC more often equals more risk. The potency of THC in cannabis products is increasing, with potential health implications. High potency THC, like concentrates and isolates, are more likely to cause dependency, addiction. Then, if you like, I like the way they tend to try and soften the blow with certain terminologies. Dependency, or you just say addiction. If you end up having to depend on something you can't do without it, then you're addicted to it, aren't you? So dependency, cognitive impairments, and adverse effects, including anxiety, paranoia, and psychosis. It's the CBD that calms you down, by the way, chills you out, not the THC. And people observe certain YouTubers that boast about smoking this, and some evidence have shown that they posted things and boasted about, oh, it's high in THC. There are certain legit reasons for doing it, because of people who have medical issues, to deaden their pain, they're taking THC. But yeah, that's brings to mind a certain individual who's proven to be a bit psychotic and extremely paranoid, and it says here, paranoia and psychosis. So, especially in vulnerable populations or heavy users, studies have explored the relationship between higher THC doses and health outcomes, including cannabis use disorder. There we go, that's what it was. Uh, CUD. You go to a doctor, you got CUD, cannabis use disorder. You can't stop using it, basically. You're addicted. Cardiovascular issues. That's not good. Psychosis, depression, suicide, violence, and impaired driving. Regular use of high potency cannabis is associated with an increased likelihood of dependence, craving, and withdrawal symptoms. Individuals consuming high THC think again, it's like, again, Woodstock, 1% THC, and this was just stuff they were finding and growing. They weren't doing anything too fancy with getting the different strains too far off the beaten track. But the more human nature finds something good and it becomes rare, what do? We hunt it down, or we find ways to get more of it? And that's what's happened there. Inevitable, really. Should do a video on how the CIA had an involvement with LSD being popular. Yeah, because that would probably involve events like Woodstock as well. Anyway, let's read on. This is important information. Really, you really need to consider this. How much are you taking? Do you need it in really practical application of it? Do you need it for medical purposes? Should you be having more CBD than THC for your medical use? Consult a doctor, and so on. So individuals consuming high THC cannabis daily are more prone to schizophrenia, early onset psychosis, suggesting that there is a dose response relationship between THC potency and adverse mental health outcomes. With the sleep thing, if it's reducing REM sleep, it's reducing the most natural state in sleep. You know, whenever you sleep, a proper sleep will always involve REM sleep, and it's when you're at your deepest part and you're dreaming. You will die sooner from lack of sleep than you will from starvation. That's a known thing. For some reason, the brain has to sleep. We have got to sleep. And sleep disorders are a thing that can be aggravated by this as well, like sleep paralysis. And that can happen with individuals anyway. And there's something that goes wrong with the functioning. It's like when you're sleeping, your body is paralyzed so that you don't physically walk around and act out your dreams. But things can go wrong and people sleepwalk. Or things can go wrong and you're awake or semi-awake, but the paralysis hasn't been switched off. So you're just kind of half in the dream state and half out. Don't panic if that happens, because that will induce a nightmare. Those who've had that experience will know exactly what I'm talking about. And one way to get yourself out of it is you might find you'll be able to wiggle your fingers a little bit. Tiny bit. And your toes. Do that. And keep doing that. And eventually you'll be able to, it will sort of transition. Now you can wiggle your whole fingers in your hand, and you'll sort of wiggle yourself out of that paralysis. So while doing what you can mentally to be calm about the situation, not a pleasant experience. Regardless, let's read on. So psychosis, depression, all this is not good. And people have boasted about drunk people versus weed. What's even worse is people who are smoking a lot of weed and they're getting drunk. Oh, it's not pretty. And they're the worst kind of drunks actually out there. And boy, do they get dysfunctional. And alcohol really should be recognized as a hardcore drug. Because it is, let's face it. So individuals consuming high THC cannabis daily are prone to these things, like schizophrenia, early onset psychosis, suggesting there's a relationship between high dose of THC and adverse mental outcomes. Additionally, the CDC, that's the Center for Disease Control, notes that cannabis use can increase for psychosis and schizophrenia. So, it's another authority that says, yeah, is agreeing that this can really screw you up mentally, especially in men and those starting to use an early age at an early age. Daily use of high potency cannabis can also contributes to an earlier onset of psychosis in users. Cardiovascular effects of cannabis, particularly high THC products, include increased heart rate, blood pressure, which may exacerbate underlying heart conditions and induce heart related emergencies. Acute use may increase heart rate and blood pressure, triggering cardiovascular events in susceptible individuals. THC impairs motor coordination. So, motor coordination, bad judgment, paranoia. Alcohol does this as well if you drink enough of it. Yeah. The reason why, well, I don't want to go off too much of a tangent because we're talking about cannabis, but there's reasons, specific reasons why alcohol is addictive and why it makes you feel happy. Yeah, distance, and it helps you distance yourself from your issues, up which aren't going to go away magically, you know. Um, so impaired higher thinking definitely with alcohol. THC impairs motor coordination, reaction time. We see that with alcohol, and judgment. We see that with alcohol. Increasing risk of motor vehicle and other accidents, and higher THC doses can cause more impairment. Furthermore, individuals with THC in their system may be more likely to cause accidents. Well, of course, ultra high dose THC cannabis products like concentrates, wax, shatter, and oils may reach very high THC levels of 60 to 90%. The adolescent's brain is particularly vulnerable to high dose THC due to ongoing brain development, especially in the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex has been discussed a little bit here and there concerning another individual that comes to mind over the internet who's lost his mind entirely. One surefire way to underline evidence that he's lost his mind, lost the higher thinking, which definitely involves prefrontal cortex among other parts of our brain, is that this person reiterates MAGA propaganda, and it's all emotion. MAGA propaganda, it's all fight, emotion. We are emotional creatures first before we're critical thinking second. But if you lose the critical thinking, what you're going to do is just going to copy all the emotion. This person, I think, is embarrassed about their now lack of ability to think critically. But such people will also use cognitive dissonance to distance themselves from their lack to make themselves feel more comfortable. And, cognitive dissonance might run something like, I could never have been this wrong or this stupid, because that would mean I'm that X amount of dysfunctional. Therefore, I must be right. It's just shuffling things around to make yourself feel better. We all do a little bit of cognitive dissonance. Everybody, even people like myself, talking about how nuanced it can be. I do it, you do it, everybody does it. We all project. Sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad ways, whatever. but we all do it. Yeah, human brain's not really wired to cope very well with THC high levels. Um, it's not wired very well to cope with a lot of things, but how we are is that we kind of are a primate that is high all the time. We're always looking for that buzz, dopamine buzz, THC buzz, caffeine buzz, sugar buzz, alcohol, you name it. So we got a problem. We're drug addicts. We're druggies as primates. Yeah, human beings are primates. We're monkeys, right? So yeah, where was I reading? Prefrontal cortex, which governs decision making. Let me underline that again. Because some people are going to be thinking about somebody who's. The prefrontal is just behind the forehead, hence the name, frontal cortex. If you have a blow to your head, it can damage that. By the way, if you see somebody, a doctor, about concussion and headaches, and is a blow to head, soon enough, the surprising amount of damage can be mitigated. But if it's left to go because you're perhaps really stubborn and think, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, it's everyone else, it's fine, or whatever kind of bullshit attitude when all friends and family are saying, no, go see a doctor, we're concerned. Um, Usually, if it's left to go too long, you get micro bleeding, perhaps, or bruising at the brain. You could risk stroke as well. Of course, there'll be a bleed on the brain, right? Regardless, it's kind of like you're losing the ability to mitigate the damage exponentially further down the line. And a certain individual has exponentially got more and more outlandish. It's comical, really, because they're so late to the game. MAGA's imploding and they jumped on the MAGA train ready to crash. You know? Um, yeah. So prefrontal cortex, yada yada. Poor decision making, impulse control. Can't control impulses. Again, if your critical thinking skills are diminished, what's left? Emotion and impulse. But you're not controlling it because that needs to involve critical thinking. Or hang on a minute, don't jump the gun. Is this wise to do? Have some patience, yada yada, right? And emotional regulation. Exposure to high levels of THC during critical period can have significant lasting effects on brain structure, function, and behavior. Ultra high potency products are linked to increased risks of addiction, psychosis, and other adverse effects. Research shows that prevalence of CUD, cannabis dependency, is higher in states with recreational cannabis laws. States, I guess they're talking about the United States because it's only America, right? It's nowhere else. THC and the adolescent brain. Researchers have identified key risks from high THC exposure for adolescent brains. For example, THC disrupts the hippocampus, a region critical for memory formation. Disruption may lead to difficulties in learning and retaining information. Long-term cannabis use initiated during adolescence is associated with a decline in IQ scores. People have said IQ tests are bullshit. I think those people misunderstand the purpose of the IQ test. IQ does not measure knowledge. That would be stupid. So I tell you something Here's some new information. That doesn't really increase your IQ. It measures your ability to learn new things and understand new nuanced things, working things out. It measures that ability, not knowledge, but your ability to gain knowledge and understand what you learned. So, in addition, high THC exposure can reduce gray matter volume in the prefrontal cortex. There's a lot about coming that keeps coming up about prefrontal cortex, and it's worth looking into. I do think there is some nuance to IQ tests, by the way, because it doesn't really account for some things like neurodivergence and how some people can be really good at spatial awareness, but at the same time be really crappy at math, or vice versa, and how a study of one thing can improve another. But then I think the original creator of the IQ test realized that a study of one thing improved another. But there's nuance. There's things there that kind of escape the usual um, expectation here and there. It's not perfect, but it's a fairly good way to discern some types of intelligence, because there's intelligence people talk about as generic, kind of blanket term, but there's different types, different ways of learning, and so on. Anyway, IQ scores. In addition, high THC exposure can reduce gray matter volume in the prefrontal cortex, impairing executive functions. Again, I've said before, the prefrontal is very much like the executive part of our brain, organizing thoughts and that are useful to organize things for planning and your future goals, yeah, and what you should be doing in the present, so that the future can be taken care of by what you're doing in the present, so on, and controlling your impulse control, and so on. Yeah. THC also affects the brain's white matter, reducing connectivity between brain regions, crucial for coordinated cognitive processes. Yeah, I imagine time is. Did a video about time. And again, we think of time as past, present, and future. But I can imagine the brain's processing of time kind of gets a little bit messed up when there's too much THC side effects going on. Because it's all part of organizing things, isn't it? Time, really, how we perceive it. How time really is, don't know, but how we perceive it is there's a good part of that is organizing the thoughts in a orderly manner. Adolescents using high THC products are at higher risk for developing cannabis-induced psychosis and long-term psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia, especially in those with a genetic predisposition, more likelihood. Chronic cannabis use has been linked to heightened anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and suicides in adolescence. That's correct. That's horrifying, really. It's horrible. It's just a lot of this has been left unchecked among society. And, if you legalize, you take it off the black market, get it more controlled, then you know what you're selling rather than just all this multiple strains being grown for what, and you don't know what else is with it as well. It's just not good. Um, THC, I read that bit. Yada yada yada. Da, 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 da. Adolescents are more likely than adults to develop cannabis use disorder due to high neuroplasticity during this developmental stage, making the brain more susceptible to addiction. The resulting impaired cognitive and emotional regulation may lead to academic underperformance and difficulties in interpersonal relationships. Some neurobiological effects of adolescent cannabis use, such as reduced gray matter volume and altered connectivity, may persist into adulthood even after the substance is stopped. It's a permanent detriment then. Asking experts about risk and current issues. According to Johns Hopkins University researcher Chris Hammond, MD, and a PhD, rapid shifts in state and federal cannabis policies across the United States and also commercialization and societal normalization of cannabis use carry unknown health implications for American youth. It's something that's so detrimental left to go ahead, and a country that really suffers with its education system. So, number one, you got something that's really detrimental to the brain to start with, and it affects the ability to learn new things, lowers your IQ, and you got something that's a really, really poor education system, and really, it's these should be big, fat, humongous, in your face, giant clues as why America is such a failure, and also the amount of crap that's put in the food for the junk food industry in America, which is a lot cheaper than healthier food. And that's true across the board, though. That's not just America, but from what I see, it's a worst case of it in America when it comes to that. Yeah, it's a shame, and get people addicted to things in consumerism and entertainment, in emotion only, but don't involve the prefrontal cortex or the neocortex or the anything else that is higher thinking, just emotion. And no wonder you end up with a product of such idiocy that is Donald Trump. He's a product of all of America's ills, really. That should be kept in mind, because if Trump dies or whatever, there's another idiot behind him. Also, it should be asked who's advising this individual. Who wanted to use him to put him in place in the first place? Because I guarantee there's some people who are thinking that way. Why? Well, because Trump's an advocate of looking after the rich, right? And he's one of them. He's looking after his own gang, his own cult, and anybody who tells him yes. And that's another thing about prefrontal damage. If you keep surrounding yourself with people who go, yes, you're right, I know, it's true, that's because you can't handle the critical thinking that's needed to be involved in a debate, probably. You surround yourself with yes men and yes women who don't argue with you and just keep repeating. Well, so what MAGA do? They just repeat one of those rhetoric, and it becomes extremely stagnant. We all know the mantras of MAGA is they're all the same, and every time we hear them, think, oh, that's not true, because the world moves on from even if there was any truth to the mantras, and the world will move on from those. But also, the world has moved on from them from decades before MAGA anyway, already. These are extremely backward, old ideas, and ideas that are coloured with religiosity, and religion's another thing that's dying out. And, like banning abortions, the argument that is, oh, it's pro-life. The MAGA crowd has never ever talked about the implications of when pregnancies go wrong and an abortion is needed to save the mother's life. That's pro-life. Um, yeah, but there's no higher thinking involved. You need higher thinking to understand these things, to rather than just be reactive, primal, and primitive, saying no, we need to breed. Yeah, primal, instinctive, reactionary, but no, it's all emotion, only emotion. And that's all Trump ever did was talk emotion to us from day one. Well, there was no details on anything anywhere. Anyway, I've talked about it before, but let's try to not go off too much of a tangent again. So, neuroscientist Yasmin Hurd, PhD, of the Icahn School of Medicine, emphasizes that the adolescent brain is highly vulnerable to THC due to ongoing development, especially the prefrontal cortex. Her studies demonstrate that early exposure to THC disrupts neural connections, leading to long lasting issues with memory, learning, emotional control. Animal research from her lab shows that THC exposure during adolescence can lead to increased sensitivity to other drugs and compulsive behaviors. There's some evidence that CBD, ironically, helps neurons preserve and grow. Yeah, you've increased the wrong one, you know. Uh, I'll do a separate video on CBD, what I can find on it. I did have quite a bit of information on it long before I met the community I was mingling with right now, and long before I even bothered to do much on YouTube. And I was beginning to, but I didn't really talk about that. It was more interested in what about any micron of evidence within paranormal and things like that. Because the whole paranormal field of things is two big egos on that train that get in the way of really discovering much at all. Gets in the way of the scientific side of things, like uh, things like haunted locations and that kind of thing. A building labeled as haunted. Well, try to really investigate, and if you're part of a investigation team for one of those types of buildings, you're going to find that the whole team just ego trips, and some individuals like myself are really trying to get past that and not feel like, oh, we're doing this, oh, it's total respect to the spirits or whatever. And it's just, there's too much ego in the way of actual discovery. I do think that some places have, we interpret it as, people interpret these places as haunted. There's something going on with some places that equals that interpretation, but what is actually really going on, I've no idea, and it seems to be impossible to find out because big egos get in the way, and people end up talking to a radio station, a ghost box. Go and look up the ghost box, and if you know anything about pareidolia, well, there's an audible side effect of pareidolia as well. It's like people are just talking to blips of radio frequencies, not some entity or ghost. But having said that, there's things I've experienced and seen that can't explain away too easy whatsoever, and had me convinced that some of these places are actually something unexplained going on in them. Put it that way. I'll do a separate video on all that. But the big egos get in the way, and people go off on emotional tangents and pretend, love to fantasize that they're special, they know these things, and they're a psychic and all this or whatever. You wonder what they're taking to get so tripped out. Let me read on again. I've gone another mini tangent here a little bit. Neuroscientist Yasmin Hurd, I read that bit. Her studies demonstrate that early exposure disrupts young brains. Yeah, the effects may persist into adulthood or even across generations. That's very worrying. Hud worries about exposure to potent cannabis and cannabinoid extracts heightening health risks for vulnerable groups associated with sensitive windows of brain development, the fetuses of pregnant women, children, adolescents, and emerging adults. Certainly, I hate to see pregnant women drinking alcoholic beverages. I've witnessed that. And, if you're doing something with too much THC, it's like what are you doing? It's just, it's a detriment. Right. Nora Volko, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, MD, director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, as NIDA for short, emphasizes non use of cannabis and prevention. She also warns about the potential harm cannabis poses to adolescent brain. Yeah, this reads on a bit, scroll down and comes to a conclusion. Neuroscience research has advanced knowledge of cannabis pharmacological and the endocannabinoid system in the brain on which cannabis acts. Right, rising THC potency in cannabis correlates with increased risk of cannabis use disorder, cannabis cardiovascular issues, psychosis, accident, uh, depression, and impaired driving. Experts warn that cannabis can not be used by pregnant women. Sorry, should not be used. Obviously. Children, teens, and young adults, cannabis use by teens and young adults is causing increasing rates of schizophrenia, psychosis, depression, and suicide. That wouldn't be the only thing. I mean, there's so much crap going on in today's society, but again, it's not going to help. And it certainly would be not a tiny thing to add to everything that's gone on. It'd be quite a chunky bit, I think. Especially when you consider, like they're saying, the development of the brain, and there's a lots of kind of show off side effect with young teenagers, and there's like the whole vaping crowd is they smoke weed as well as vape and do everything else. The whole vaping thing was a bait and switch thing just to get people addicted to something else because too many people now knew and understood how detrimental cigarettes were. So, we'll get them addicted to something else and make money out of that. That's all that was. That's all it was from day one. It wasn't hey, we're worried about your health. Do this instead. And a lot of the vapes were snazzy patterns and colors and vibrant. It was aimed at a younger crowd. That's why. Yeah. And the whole advertising was like, do that to get you off the cigarettes. But it doesn't, Didn't work. It didn't really work for a lot of people. It worked for some people, I guess. You can really, but it's down to the individual. It's more subjective than objective, isn't it? It's just like you could use that avenue for betterment, vape instead of smoke cigarettes, but it's more individual thing than it is. There's very little objective facts of how it's going to work as get you off the cigarettes at all, really. It just depends on how your approach is. Thank you for watching. Just thought I'd share this article, and there was a bunch of other information, other articles here. I think it's important to share this information, put this out there via whatever platforms that people are on and talk about this. And again, eventually I'll probably write about this, and then, I might revisit this, and I'll be looking into what are they finding that to mitigate such addiction, and what else are they finding, what THC does. There is a bunch of other things actually I'm thinking of right now that isn't addressed in this psychologytoday.com article, and again, that's not good news either. There's other things I'm thinking about with THC, but we get to that in a separate video. I think is enough for this video. Cheers, take care. I'll look forward to doing another video soon. Bye.